Thutmose II is a king who feels more like a shadow than a ruler, a pharaoh whose presence flickers faintly in the vast torchlight of Egyptian history. While other monarchs etch their triumphs into stone and carve their names across temple walls, his traces seem to dissolve the closer one looks. Much of this fading outline is due to the towering figure beside him, Hatshepsut, his formidable wife and later pharaoh in her own right. Her legacy rises like an obelisk, while his sinks beneath drifting sands. Yet the silence around him is too complete, too deliberate, to dismiss as mere obscurity. Why would a king of the mighty 18th dynasty leave almost no monuments, no grand inscriptions, no confident claim to eternity? Historians continue to wrestle with the unsettling possibility that Thutmose II was not simply forgotten, but erased. His absence becomes a riddle that refuses to fade with time. In an era when every pharaoh commanded a monumental resting place, the absence of Thutmose II's tomb hangs over the Valley of the Kings like a quiet accusation. His predecessors and successors lie in chambers carved deep into the limestone cliffs, each designed to guide their souls into eternity. Yet for Thutmose II, king of a flourishing empire, there is nothing. No confirmed burial, no decorated walls, no funerary goods bearing his cartouche. It is as if his tomb slipped out of history's grasp, leaving only questions in its wake. Scholars have proposed theories to fill the void, but each one seems to crumble under its own weight. Some argue his burial was unfinished. Others claim it was destroyed, and a few whisper that it was deliberately hidden. But the contradictions are impossible to ignore. Fragments of objects bearing his name surface in places they shouldn't, while clues that might point toward a tomb vanish just as quickly as they appear. It is this pattern, strange dance of discovery and disappearance, that fuels the deeper mystery. Why would a king of the powerful 18th dynasty be denied the one thing every pharaoh was promised? A home for eternity? No one has an answer that truly satisfies. The Valley of the Kings sprawls across the desert like a maze carved by time itself, a place where sunlight meets stone and history sinks deep into the earth. Beneath its rugged cliffs lie passages and chambers stacked like forgotten layers of a buried city. Some explored, many sealed, and others only suspected through faint tremors in the bedrock. Archaeologists have long understood that the valley is far from fully mapped. Every excavation reveals hints of deeper structures lying silently below. In such a place, a lost tomb is not just possible, it's almost expected. And so a tantalizing question lingers. What if Thutmose II's resting place lies directly beneath the feet of those who have searched for it? What if it sits hidden under an existing burial, concealed by ancient architects who understood secrecy as a form of protection? The valley's winding corridors seem to whisper the same unsettling promise. Not every mystery here has been unearthed, and as we move forward, the search for Thutmose II's vanished tomb becomes a descent into the unknown. Thutmose II's reign has always felt strangely fragile, as if the very foundations of his kingship were built on shifting desert sand. The records that survive paint a portrait of a pharaoh whose authority flickered rather than blazed, a ruler overshadowed by the formidable figures around him. Some texts describe him leading campaigns in Nubia and beyond, yet even these accounts feel uncertain, almost defensive, as though the scribes were trying to craft a strength that reality did not fully support. His reign was short, marked by whispers of illness and weakness, and the court around him seemed eager to move on. What makes this so unsettling is how inconsistent the surviving inscriptions are, glorifying him in one line, omitting him entirely in the next. It leaves historians trapped between fragments, wondering whether Thutmose II was meant to rule at all, or whether his pharaohhood existed only out of necessity, not destiny. When Thutmose II ascended to the throne, the real power in the palace may have belonged not to him, but to Hatshepsut, the brilliant and ambitious woman who would soon redefine Egyptian kingship. As his wife, queen, and half-sister, she stood at the center of political gravity, commanding loyalty from powerful officials and priests. The more closely historians examine the era, the more it seems that Thutmose II's presence faded while hers grew brighter until eventually she eclipsed him entirely. After his death, she stepped into the throne with astonishing confidence, first as regent, then as pharaoh in her own right. But this transition casts a long shadow. Did Hatshepsut's ascent require the soft erasure of her husband's memory? Was his disappearance from major monuments simply political necessity, or something more deliberate? The contradictions in the record only deepen the mystery, fueling speculation that his tomb's absence may not be accidental. If Thutmose II had been granted the royal tomb he deserved, his body would have rested in a grand chamber lined with inscriptions proclaiming his eternity. Instead, his mummy was found centuries later in a hidden cache, tucked away with other displaced royals, an odd, almost desperate arrangement reserved for times of crisis. His remains showed signs of being stripped of their original burial goods, hastily rewrapped, and concealed far from any known tomb. This raises a troubling question. Why was the body of a pharaoh removed from its rightful place? Was his tomb robbed early in history, or did someone intentionally erase the evidence of where he'd once been laid to rest? The absence of funerary items bearing his name, combined with the mysterious relocation, suggests that his burial story was disrupted in ways no historian can fully explain. His mummy's exile becomes a haunting reminder that something about his death and his tomb was not meant to be seen. At Karnak, where kings usually immortalized their achievements in sweeping lines of hieroglyphs, the traces of Thutmose II appear like faint echoes rather than declarations. A few scattered inscriptions mention construction works or small dedications tied to his name, but none carry the grand language expected of a ruling pharaoh. Even more curious are several damaged fragments referencing a house of eternity, a phrase typically used for a royal tomb. These fragments hint at a burial project, yet nothing in the Valley of the Kings corresponds to it. Some Egyptologists believe the references point toward an aborted construction effort, abandoned before completion. Others argue that the missing structure once existed but vanished through a combination of natural decay and deliberate concealment. The most intriguing theory, however, suggests that these inscriptions are the surviving fingerprints of a tomb that was planned, started, and then quietly erased from the official record. The faintness of the evidence and the secrecy around it feels intentional, as if someone had tried to make Thutmose II's eternal house disappear before it was ever fully built. Deep within the winding corridors of KV-20, a tomb long associated with Hatshepsut, archaeologists uncovered fragments of ceilings bearing the cartouche of Thutmose II. Their presence there makes little sense, at least within traditional interpretations of the tomb's purpose. KV-20 is thought to be the original burial place of Hatshepsut and possibly her father, Thutmose I. Yet objects linked to Thutmose II appear scattered in its depths, as though remnants of a forgotten ritual or an abandoned burial transfer. Some scholars believe this suggests KV-20 may have initially been intended as his resting place, later repurposed when political circumstances shifted. Others theorize that the ceilings were brought there during a hurried attempt to relocate royal remains during times of danger. But the inconsistencies in the archaeological layers only deepen the mystery. Why were these items present if Thutmose II was never interred there? And if he was, even briefly, why does no formal burial record survive? The ceilings sit like silent witnesses, hinting at a story that was never meant to be recorded, leaving researchers to speculate about a hidden chapter within the tomb's twisting corridors. Modern surveys of the Valley of the Kings have revealed something that earlier explorers could only guess at: pockets of empty space hidden beneath the ground, voids that suggest sealed chambers untouched for millennia. Among these anomalies are several located near areas historically linked to the early 18th dynasty, precisely the era in which Thutmose II would have been buried. Some of these voids are positioned beneath known tombs, while others below unexcavated slopes where rock slides may have buried ancient entrances. The idea that one of these hidden chambers could contain his lost resting place feels increasingly plausible. Geological scans show unusual structural patterns, flat plains, right-angled corners that do not occur naturally. If one of these shadows in the earth is indeed a tomb, it may have remained sealed since the moment it was abandoned or concealed. The deeper the scans go, the more they suggest that the valley still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered, and Thutmose II may be at the heart of them. Some Egyptologists believe that the architects of Thutmose II's burial may have engaged in a level of secrecy far beyond what was typical for the time. These scholars point to structural oddities around tombs, such as KV-42 and KV-18, subtle signs that deeper tunnels once branched off from their known chambers. The possibility that a hidden passage extends beneath an existing burial has intrigued researchers for decades. In a place where tombs often intersect like layers of forgotten architecture, such a design would not be impossible. But why conceal a king's resting place so completely? One theory suggests that those responsible intended to create a tomb that would be nearly impossible to find, perhaps to shield it from political enemies or ritual desecration. Another idea proposes that Thutmose II's burial was part of a complex architectural experiment, one that blurred the boundaries between tombs. Each theory adds another strand of intrigue, reinforcing the notion that concealment may have been deliberate. A contrasting theory paints a more chaotic picture of Thutmose II's final days. According to this view, the pharaoh died unexpectedly, leaving his tomb incomplete and his embalmers scrambling to prepare a burial site unfit for royal standards. In such moments of crisis, the priority would have been speed rather than ceremony, leading to a rushed sealing of an unfinished chamber. If this happened, the tomb might have been small, unadorned, and easily forgotten, overshadowed by later construction. Over centuries, shifting rock, floods, or architectural expansions could have buried it entirely. This theory gains momentum when considering the unusual placement of his mummy in a later cache, suggesting his original burial had been compromised, plundered, or simply abandoned. A tomb built in haste leaves fewer traces and fewer clues, and that absence only deepens the unsettling possibility that his final resting place was never meant to stand proudly among the great monuments of his dynasty. The question of motive lingers like a shadow. If Thutmose II's tomb was deliberately concealed or destroyed, who stood to benefit from erasing a pharaoh's legacy? Some scholars point to Hatshepsut, arguing that a weak or incomplete burial might have served her political narrative as she rose to power. Others look to later kings, particularly Thutmose, who may have tried to reshape the historical record to diminish rivals or justify their own authority. There is also the possibility that religious officials orchestrated the concealment to protect royal remains during turbulent times. Yet each explanation holds contradictions, leaving historians grasping at fragments. The idea that someone intentionally obscured Thutmose II's burial sparks more questions than answers. Was this an act of political strategy, religious necessity, or something far more personal? The silence in the historical record feels less like oversight and more like intentional omission, and that makes the mystery all the more compelling. When the hidden royal cache at Deir el-Bahari was uncovered in the late 19th century, it revealed a haunting collection of displaced pharaohs whose tombs had been violated or threatened centuries earlier. Among them lay Thutmose II, wrapped and rewrapped in layers of linen that did not match the elegance or craftsmanship of a traditional royal burial. The cache itself was not a tomb, but a refuge, a secret storehouse used by priests to safeguard royal mummies from rampant looting. The very presence of Thutmose II among these rescued kings is a puzzle. Why had his body been moved? What had happened to the tomb that should have held him? Unlike some of the other mummies, whose original burial locations are well documented, Thutmose II's journey into the cache lacks any clear narrative. His displacement feels abrupt, almost furtive, as though someone wanted him hidden away rather than ceremoniously repositioned. Standing among the other rulers, his mummy seems to whisper a quiet truth. Whatever happened to his tomb occurred early, decisively, and with motives still obscured by time. Close examination of Thutmose II's mummy reveals clues that deepen the enigma. His wrappings differ in texture and style from the meticulous bandaging used during his lifetime, suggesting that priests rewrapped him generations later, possibly more than once. Beneath the linen, signs of tampering become visible. Layers disturbed, amulets missing, and resin applied inconsistently. This level of intervention implies that his original burial was compromised in some dramatic way. Some scholars argue that priests may have removed royal items to safeguard them from tomb robbers, but the absence of certain objects typically considered essential to a pharaoh's afterlife hints at a more unusual disruption. Was the rewrapping merely protective or part of a larger effort to obscure his identity? The inconsistencies fuel speculation that those who handled his body knew something dangerous, something that required concealment rather than preservation. Whatever the reason, these alterations transform his mummy into a relic not just of death, but of secrecy. Among the most striking features of Thutmose II's mummy is the large lesion found on his chest, a wound that has puzzled medical historians for decades. While some attribute it to a skin disease, such as disease-related ulceration, others argue that the pattern and depth suggest something more violent or unusual. The lesion does not align neatly with common illnesses of the era, nor does it resemble the ritual incisions typically used during mummification. Its presence raises unsettling questions about the circumstances of his death. Did Thutmose II suffer from a condition so disfiguring that it contributed to the erasure of his legacy? Or could the wound indicate foul play, an act of violence that could have sparked political upheaval if revealed? The priests who rewrapped him seem to have taken great care to cover the damaged area, as though hiding a scandal that future generations were not meant to uncover. The lesion complicates every narrative about his final days, blurring the line between natural death and darker possibilities. In a dynasty defined by power struggles and shifting loyalties, even a single unexplained wound can hint at secrets capable of reshaping history. Modern archaeology has turned the Valley of the Kings into a landscape that can be read not only with shovels, but with waves of invisible light. Ground-penetrating radar, once unreliable in stone-heavy environments, has grown precise enough to detect subtle shapes far beneath the surface. In recent years, several scans around KV-35, KV-34, and especially KV-20 have revealed geometric voids, shadows of chambers and corridors that do not match any known tomb plans. These anomalies appear too symmetrical to be natural, yet no entrance has ever been found. Some lie beneath rubble from ancient rockfalls, while others hide under layers of construction from later kings who built over the mistakes or secrets of their ancestors. The possibility that one of these hidden chambers belongs to Thutmose II is no longer far-fetched. It feels eerily plausible. Researchers speak cautiously, wary of stirring premature excitement, but even their restraint cannot mask the tantalizing fact. Something is there, something carved by human hands, sealed away and forgotten. Whether it is a decoy chamber, a lost annex, or the pharaoh's true resting place, remains one of the most haunting questions in modern Egyptology. Among the more daring theories proposed by archaeologists and independent researchers alike is the idea that several 18th dynasty tombs were once interconnected by hidden passages. These corridors, carved into the deeper strata of the valley, may have served ritual, symbolic, or protective purposes. KV-20, with its dizzying spiral descent and unusual layout, sits at the center of these speculations. Some believe a buried branch once extended from one of its deeper chambers, leading to a side tomb or a sealed annex. If Thutmose II's burial was originally planned or briefly placed, within this subterranean network, the later expansions by Hatshepsut and other rulers could have obscured any trace of the branching passage. Over time, collapses, sediment buildup, and deliberate sealing by priests may have erased the corridor entirely from view. Yet the radar images showing unexplained hollows suggest that something may still lie behind the labyrinthine design. The theory remains controversial, but it sparks a compelling question. What if the valley is more interconnected than we ever imagined? The Valley of the Kings is as treacherous as it is monumental. Its cliffs are carved from brittle limestone fractured by ancient earthquakes and seasonal floods that once roared through the desert wadis. In such an environment, tunnels could easily collapse. Passages could be swallowed by shifting rock, and entire entrances could vanish beneath sudden debris. Some geologists argue that Thutmose II's tomb may have suffered exactly this fate. A chamber built into an unstable section of the hillside might have collapsed shortly after construction, sealing the tomb so completely that even later Egyptians lost knowledge of its location. If priests attempted to retrieve the body during the chaos of the New Kingdom's later centuries, they may have found the entrance impassable and been forced to recover only the mummy, leaving the tomb itself entombed within the earth. In this scenario, his burial still exists, perfectly preserved behind thousands of tons of stone. What was intended as a house of eternity may have become a geological prison, a sealed capsule containing secrets untouched since the day its walls were closed. Hatshepsut's rise to power has long been interpreted through competing lenses. Was she an ambitious usurper rewriting history, or a stabilizing force acting out of necessity? When historians consider her possible role in the disappearance of Thutmose II's tomb, the ambiguity deepens. If she sought to legitimize her unprecedented reign as a female pharaoh, diminishing her husband's legacy might have strengthened her claim. Yet another interpretation suggests she may have hidden or relocated his burial to protect it during a politically fragile period. The truth is maddeningly elusive. Hatshepsut preserved the memory of some predecessors while erasing others, and Thutmose II occupies a strange space between these extremes. The contrast between her bold architectural achievements and the quiet absence of her husband's tomb raises a question that still unsettles scholars. Was she shaping a narrative or shielding a king whose burial was compromised by forces we cannot yet see? Some researchers argue that the twisting, deeply descending KV-20 may have begun as the tomb intended for Thutmose II. Its unusual architecture, with steep turns and unexpectedly narrow passages, suggests experimentation rather than the refined designs of later royal burials. Fragmentary artifacts bearing his name found deep within its corridors seem to hint at an early association. Yet no definitive evidence confirms that he was ever interred there. The theory becomes more intriguing when considering Hatshepsut's later claim on the tomb, perhaps repurposing or expanding a structure that originally belonged to her husband. If KV-20 began as his intended resting place, its transformation into a queen's burial raises possibilities of political revision, architectural adaptation, or even deliberate overwriting. The tomb's labyrinthine descent feels symbolic, as if mirroring the complex and shifting loyalties of the early 18th dynasty. Whether KV-20 once held Thutmose II remains unproven, but the clues are difficult to ignore. The notion that Hatshepsut built her monumental burial over the remnants of Thutmose II's original tomb is one of the most provocative theories in this mystery. Such an act would not necessarily signal malice. It may have been a practical decision shaped by architectural opportunity or ceremonial intent. Yet the implications are profound. If her builders encountered parts of an earlier burial, chambers begun or abandoned, corridors partially carved, they may have integrated, buried, or concealed them within the final design. Over centuries, the deeper layers would vanish beneath Hatshepsut's grand project, effectively erasing any trace of Thutmose III's intended afterlife home. This layered construction mirrors the political layering of their reigns, where her narrative overshadowed his, leaving him obscured in both stone and memory. The idea that his tomb may lie hidden beneath hers adds a tantalizing depth to the mystery, suggesting that the answer might be entangled within the very architecture of her ambition. Long before he uncovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, Howard Carter roamed the Valley of the Kings with a meticulous eye and an instinct for anomalies. Among his early journals are scattered references to unidentified royal fragments discovered near the slopes surrounding KV-20. These notes, brief but tantalizing, describe pieces of pottery and broken ceilings that bore partial cartouches, some of which scholars later suspected belonged to Thutmose II. Yet Carter never pursued the lead, perhaps due to lack of funding or the overwhelming complexity of the terrain. What makes his observations so compelling today is the tone of hesitation in his writing, as if he sensed that the fragments pointed to something buried deeper than he was prepared to explore. His references were quietly filed away. overlooked by researchers focused on more prominent finds. Only decades later did historians revisit these notes and wonder whether Carter had unknowingly walked directly above a forgotten royal tomb. During the 1930s, another team attempted to excavate a promising site near the cliffs between KV-20 and KV-34, an area long thought to contain hidden architectural features. Their progress was abruptly halted when unstable rock formations threatened to collapse, forcing them to abandon the dig and seal the entrance for safety. What they found before retreating, however, remains one of the most intriguing footnotes in Valley of the Kings research. A partially exposed doorway carved with unusual precision, positioned at an angle inconsistent with nearby tombs. The team noted traces of ancient plaster and a faint imprint of a royal ceiling, though none were clear enough to confirm an identity. Before they could investigate further, funding ceased and the dangerous shaft was left untouched. Over time, sand and rubble swallowed the site once more, leaving behind a mystery that modern archaeologists have never fully revisited. That sealed door still lies buried, waiting. In recent decades, improvements in scanning and imaging technology have breathed new life into theories surrounding Thutmose II's missing tomb. Scholars analyzing 3D terrain models and radar returns have noticed structural irregularities beneath areas previously considered unremarkable. These anomalies align eerily well with the locations documented in Carter's journals in the abandoned 1930s excavation. Meanwhile, Egyptologists revisiting textual evidence have detected inconsistencies in burial records from the early 18th dynasty, suggesting that royal bodies may have been moved more frequently than once believed. Some researchers argue that these clues point toward a single, unresolved narrative: a tomb constructed, concealed, lost, and perhaps partially rediscovered across generations. While mainstream archaeology remains cautious, a growing number of experts now believe that the valley's bedrock still hides an undiscovered chamber. Whether it belongs to Thutmose II is uncertain, but the convergence of old observations and new technology has reopened a mystery once considered unsolvable. In a region where almost every known tomb bears scars of invasion, the idea that Thutmose II's burial might remain untouched feels almost mythical. Yet certain clues suggest that such a possibility cannot be dismissed. Archaeological surveys of the valley have revealed sealed voids with no signs of ancient disturbance, no tunneling, no ventilation passages, no evidence of human intrusion. These chambers, if indeed artificial, would be among the few remaining pockets of unviolated antiquity. Adding to the intrigue, fragments associated with Thutmose II found in later caches show none of the typical wear or smoke damage seen on items recovered from robbed tombs. This discrepancy has led some researchers to speculate that his funerary goods may have been retrieved from a pristine chamber, their sanctity preserved even as his mummy was relocated. If his original tomb still lies sealed, it could contain royal treasures, inscriptions, and architectural designs lost to time. The promise of discovering a complete untouched burial is not just rare, it is transformative, a potential revelation that could reshape everything we understand about early 18th dynasty ritual. Paradoxically, the very forces that threaten tombs in the Valley of the Kings may have also served as protectors. Geological studies reveal that sections of the cliffs are riddled with ancient fracture lines, weaknesses that have triggered collapses throughout history. While catastrophic for some structures, such collapses can seal chambers so thoroughly that they become invisible to both robbers and later builders. It is possible that Thutmose II's burial suffered such a fate. If a corridor or entrance collapsed shortly after his interment, the tomb might have been rendered inaccessible, even to those tasked with maintaining it. Over centuries, shifting sediment could have buried the collapse further, creating an unbroken expanse of rock where a doorway once stood. In this scenario, the priest who later retrieved his mummy may have located only a portion of the tomb or recovered his body from a peripheral chamber. The core burial chamber, containing inscriptions, sarcophagus fragments, and ritual artifacts, could still lie intact behind the geological barricade. This theory transforms the missing tomb from a lost structure to a sealed time capsule, waiting for the day when technology catches up with its concealment. If Thutmose II's tomb is ever uncovered, the discoveries within could alter the historiography of the early 18th dynasty. His burial goods would likely include traditional royal items, golden shabti figures, ceremonial jewelry, and intricately carved canopic jars, but they might also hold texts or inscriptions revealing political tensions of his era. Scholars speculate that such artifacts could clarify his relationship with Hatshepsut, shed light on the administrative reforms of his reign, or explain the circumstances surrounding his death. Even architectural features would be invaluable. The layout of the tomb could reveal whether it was built quickly, modified over time, or designed with secrecy in mind. Every detail, from wall paintings to sarcophagus design, would deepen our understanding of this enigmatic ruler. What makes this prospect so compelling is the possibility that the tomb contains answers to questions that have frustrated historians for centuries. Uncovering it would not merely resolve a missing chapter, it would rewrite the narrative of Egypt's most transformative dynasty. Thutmose II occupies a strange realm between visibility and disappearance, a king whose existence is undeniable, yet whose legacy slips constantly through the fingers of history. His reign is preserved in fragments, inscriptions half erased, statues unclaimed, and a mummy divorced from its original resting place. And yet, in this very absence, he achieves a peculiar form of immortality. While other kings lie comfortably documented in their decorated tombs, Thutmose II endures as a mystery that refuses to settle. Every unanswered question keeps his memory alive, driving scholars to re-examine evidence and explore new corners of the valley. His incomplete story resonates beyond its own era, reminding us that history is not merely a record of what was built, written, or celebrated. It is also shaped by what was lost, hidden, or erased. In this tension between presence and absence, Thutmose II becomes more than a forgotten pharaoh. He becomes a symbol of history's deepest contradictions, where the most elusive figures often cast the longest shadows. The search for Thutmose II's lost tomb extends far beyond archaeology. It speaks to our fascination with origins, power, and the fragility of memory. Each new clue offers a glimpse into the political landscape of the early 18th dynasty, a period defined by rapid expansion and unprecedented shifts in authority. Understanding his burial could shed light on how pharaohs were commemorated or deliberately obscured during turbulent transitions of power. It could also challenge assumptions about Hatshepsut's ascent, Thutmose III's reforms, and the priestly roles in managing royal remains. Modern researchers see his missing tomb not simply as an architectural void, but as a key that might unlock broader truths about Egypt's most transformative age. In an era captivated by lost civilizations and hidden histories, The mystery resonates with a public eager to question official narratives. Thutmose II's absence invites us to consider how many other stories remain buried beneath the sands, waiting for discovery. Somewhere beneath the sun-scorched terrain of the Valley of the Kings, a sealed doorway may still guard the truth of Thutmose II's final journey, whether hidden behind a collapsed passage, buried beneath layers of later construction, or concealed by design. That unseen threshold represents the last barrier between speculation and revelation. Archaeologists continue to map the valley with increasing precision, each scan hinting at the possibility of a chamber untouched since antiquity. The idea that such a tomb could exist in an era where so much has already been unearthed feels almost improbable, yet the evidence continues to gather like quiet footsteps approaching an unopened door. If that sealed chamber is ever found, it will not merely complete the biography of a shadowed pharaoh, it will illuminate an era. Until then, the mystery endures, suspended between what we know and what still lies hidden. Thutmose II's story reminds us that history's greatest secrets often rest just beyond sight, whispering their presence through fragments and shadows, waiting for the moment when the earth finally yields to curiosity